Have a seat on your porcelain throne. It's time to talk some shit on the Powell Movement.
Welcome to the Powell Movement. I'm your host, Mike Powell, and after 3 surgeries, a procedure, a blood transfusion, more pain meds than you can imagine, and a whole lot of tears, we are finally home from the hospital. While I really don't like being there, I will say there is comfort of knowing that your care is right there, and if something comes up, which seemed to happen every day, we had help fast. Now, if something comes up, we need to go to the hospital, and the car ride alone is torture for Ange. Cancer is brutal, and I could go on and on about all the miserable things that happened to my wife over the past 3 years. I mean, her life is challenging. It'll never be the same. And on my end, while I have my health, I don't really feel like I have my life. Because life has become working 2 jobs, and thank you to the guys at Die Cut Stickers for being so understanding during this time. If you have a sticker request or you want tents or any types of infrastructure for your events, I've got a crazy PDF with so many products that we make, and you can email me at mike.powell@diecutstickers.com. I will get you great pricing and some amazing product from some incredible people. So either way, I'm working 2 full-time jobs and then being a caretaker for Ange, which is a job in itself. While I am complaining because my life sucks right now, Ange's life is so much worse and I feel so bad for her. But while I feel bad, one thing we both are feeling is the love. While I don't expect anyone to donate, Caitlin Wade and Sherry McConkey set up a GoFundMe for our family. And thank you to everyone who's donated and shared. This really will make a difference. While I'm thanking people who have made a difference, I really need to thank my mom. I love her so much, and she has been out here in Seattle for the past month, helping me out with everything that's going on. It was really a lifesaver, and I'm going to miss her when she leaves tomorrow. I also want to thank my Aunt Nancy for coming out for a week as well. My mom needed support after all of this, and both Nancy and my mom got some quality time with Ange, and it was sure nice having help. It allowed me to get shit done like this podcast. And this one is really special because my guest is the most legendary living skier, period. A man who's lived a life that sounds out of a ski fairy tale. Klaus Obermeyer went from aspiring aerospace engineer to ski instructor to inventor entrepreneur, and he changed skiing more than anyone alive today. Maybe more than any person of all time. And that's a bold statement, but it's true, and you'll hear about more of that in part 2. And with this podcast, being that Klaus is 105 years old, I had his son, Klaus Jr., sitting next to him and translating some of what I said, and it made for a really interesting conversation with this legend. Before we get into it, I want to ask you to follow me on Instagram or all social media. I'm at the Powell Movement. I also want you to tell a friend about the show and subscribe wherever you listen. All these things help the podcast grow, and they're greatly appreciated. But what's most appreciated is you supporting my sponsors, and I'm stoked to have Liquid Force back this summer. If you wake surf, wake skate, foil, or wakeboard, there is no other choice than Liquid Force. They have the best product, riders, graphics, and colorways. And I have a code that I share in their ad. The code's Powell15, capital P and the number 15 with no spaces. It'll save you 15% on all your Liquid Force products. All you need to do is go over to their website, liquidforce.com, and go shopping and enter that on the checkout. But I don't need to tell you all about their deal in the intro. I need to tell you about my other sponsors, and they are just as important. They are Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Thank you so much for that support, and now it's time to chat with Klaus Obermeyer. Over the years, whether it be at a trade show, an event, skiing, or wherever you seem to be, you were surrounded by beautiful women. What's the story behind that?
Well, the story is that I like all people, and beautiful women are special. Well, I think skiing is such a beautiful sport and snowboarding that it attracts some very special people, And after the war was over, people kind of took up skiing. The 10th Mountain Division were a lot of European racers, ski racers, and mountain climbers that come over to America when Hitler started his Hitler thing, which looked awful. And so they came to America before the war and then joined the 10th Mountain Division. And so little ski shops started and little lifts were built and all over the country where the terrain was okay. So anyhow, it had attracted some of the wonderful movie stars like Gary Cooper. Uh, he learned to ski. And then the people thought, oh my God, must be really nice. And they found out how beautiful it is to be out in nature in the winter, where they used to spend the winters on the bench on the oven to stay warm. They could get out, and it was sensational. There was the speed that you could get, and just the beauty, and so many, many nice people that took up the sport.
You know, you mentioned Gary Cooper, and I heard a famous story about Gary Cooper walking into a ski lodge in Aspen or somewhere in Aspen and seeing you with your harem of girls, and Gary Cooper looking and being like, who is that guy? I want to be with that guy.
Gary came into the lobby, and I had like 6 or 7 girls around me, and he said, Klaus, I don't know what you got that I ain't got. And the next morning at breakfast, we sat on a bench, and a nice, cute girl next to him. And when she found out that it was Gary Cooper, she fainted and fell on the floor. And I said, well, Gary, I don't know what you got that I ain't got.
Oh, it's so cool. And then when you think about your other famous friends, I mean, I would think through the years being in Aspen, that's where celebrities go to be seen and ski, of course. Were you able to make friends with all the celebrities that would come through Aspen and teach them how to ski?
Yeah, Ingrid Bergman, and she was very good, but she had a very jealous husband. And he was hiding behind trees when we came down Aspen Mountain just to watch that nothing will ever happen here. But they got divorced.
Well, before you were an international man of mystery a la Austin Powers, you grew up in Oberstdorf, Germany 105 years ago, which is crazy to me. First, how did you learn how to ski 100 years ago, and what did gear look like back then?
I made my own skis when I was 3 years old. And my dad used to buy oranges in a crate in Italy, and those crates were made out of very thin chestnut boards. And I took 2 of those boards, nailed my best house shoes on them, and the nails sticking out on the bottom quite a bit, and had a string in front, and pulled that up and wound it around my knees so I had tips. But when I bent my knees forward, then I made what they call the Purzelbaum and a somersault. But those were the very, very first skis. And then my mom found the real skis a couple years later in Oslo. Stein Eriksenstedt had a ski shop and a ski factory, and those were beautiful. They had permanent tips.
Yeah.
And the binding. I mean, I didn't have to nail my house shoes on them. That really opened it up and made it just a sensational thing to be outside when everybody was inside.
You know, today skiing is something that's reserved for the wealthy, or you have to have money to be able to go skiing. But back then, was it something that anybody could do if they could make their own skis?
Well, sure. There were no lifts. You had to climb. I remember the first T-bar lift. There was a sensation because he could go up, you ski down, and right away go back up and come down, and could do that 20 times a day.
Yeah.
And that has furthered the ski technique much faster because you could do so much of it. But still, most everything you had to still climb until they built a first chairlift in Sun Valley, Idaho in 36. And in 37 in Stowe, Vermont, they built a chairlift, and that was a sensation. You could ride up the lift and see the people ski underneath you. What a luxury.
So, with all the things that you've seen in skiing, I mean, fat skis, side cut, bindings, plastic boots, the chairlift has to be the most important innovation that you've seen.
That came actually from Austria. There was a little Austrian company that built a T-bar lift. Before that, they had rope toes to hang on to, and they were relatively short. But the lifts then developed all over the place, and really, really good ones that were fast and safe and wonderful, and it just made it possible to ski so many, many more miles a day than you could before. And it affected the technique and just the better skis. Everything just developed from very small to a wonderful sport.
And when you were participating in it as a kid, and you see the kids of today, I know you have the Lennox in Aspen, and you've seen all the crazy things they've done throughout their lives if they've grown up. But with you were one of the pioneers of maybe the park aspect of things, even though there weren't parks back then. Can you tell us the story of the first front flip in Germany?
Yeah, jumping. The first turn came from Norway, and that was a telemark turn. And it worked in deep snow and was good. And then in Austria, in St. Anton, they developed the Arlberg technique, and that was the Christiania, they called it after Norwegian name, but made in Austria. Everything just grew. Naturally, there was always the competition. So you always wanted to be ahead of the next guy.
Yeah.
You wanted to be first. And you worked hard to be first, whether that was in downhill or jumping, and big jumps like a 60-meter jump that we had in Oberstaufen, for instance. And it just grew because it's also fun. It's just fun to flip over and land and keep skiing. Pretty terrific.
So you were one of the guys that did the first front flip in Germany from what I was reading, but you're also ski racing. And was ski racing something where you were traveling around Europe to race, or was it something straight out of Germany, or how did that look?
My first race, I was like 5 or 6 years old.
Wow.
It was pretty flat, mainly cross country, but also some downhill. And I came in carrying my skis at the end because the binding didn't hold. And I placed last. I placed 55. And I was crying walking through the finish line. And then I swore to myself that never, ever will happen again. And then in the next race, I was first.
Oh, wow.
And I worked like hell to get better and tougher and build the muscles and try to be unbeatable. And that happened. And I placed many competitions first, which was very They call it in German Genugtuung. It was great to have done.
And then do you make friends all over the world through ski racing? Like, is that the foundation of your friendships everywhere?
No, I did other sports, like rock climbing was great. Swimming, like in the Danube River. And I learned how to fence from the guy in Munich, foil fencing. And I just did a lot of sports. But what was really the most fun was skiing. Because you had the world for you, you know.
Yeah, it's that freedom.
And I think that's how yodeling started, you know, the yodel songs started when they were out in the winter in the big mountains. That was so beautiful that there were no words in the vocabulary that would say what it's like. And so they were just, you know,
Yeah.
they made their yodel songs because there was no way to say how beautiful it was.
It's time for my first sponsor break, and I'm going to start out with Liquid Force. And not only are they back supporting the podcast, but this summer, they're bringing back the most important party and event in wakeboarding. That's right, Brostock is back, and the contest features the best riders in the world, and the event is so much more than that. But that's not all Liquid Force is up to this summer. You know what's more fun than watching the pros ride? Riding with them. And you can ride with the Liquid Force pros like Daniel Grant, Claudia Pagini, and Gunther Oka at a local lake or cable park near you at their Ride with the Pro Tour. And while Liquid Force is doing all these great things to build community on the water, they're also on the forefront of product innovation. And if you're a foil frother, you're going to want to check out the new FuseLock foil system. Wake surfers are going to love the all-new Ace and Synchro offerings. And the 2025 line features fresh boards, rad graphics, and more comp vest colorways than ever before. Park to boat to foil, Liquid Force has gear for every rider type, whether it's boat, cable, foil, or surf. To find out more about the events and the products, head on over to liquidforce.com. And when you see something you like, put it in your cart, and when you check out, enter the code POWELL15, that's all caps with no spaces, and you will save 15% off your order. Liquid Force, feel the pull. Next up, it's Elan Skis. And Elan doesn't need to support this podcast in the summertime. I've said that every summer. But they do it because they understand the importance of cultivating the stories that make the snow industry what it is. But if you haven't noticed, while they've always been big in Europe, Elan has built a growing cult following here in the States. It all started with the still thriving ripstick revolution that made skiing easier and more fun for anyone that tried them. That same idea, easier and more fun, is what they delivered to their Playmaker series of twin tips. How does Elan deliver a better ski experience? Well, it's all about using the best materials known to man. And that's no joke. This is the same Elan that's known for building award-winning luxury yachts. So they never cut corners. And the fit and finish is better than anything else on the ski wall. Seriously, if you pick one up and you look at the edges and you see those seams of glue on all the different skis, look at Elan's and you're going to see a seamless pairing because they do take that additional time to pay that attention to detail, and it's awesome. And it makes everyone feel like they're making pro-level turns. And that's what skiing is all about, that feeling. So remember, before you buy your next pair of skis, demo a pair of Elan's, or just head on over to elanskis.com, pick a pair, and elevate your skiing experience. My final sponsor this round is Best Day Brewing. And while I love the taste of a good beer, I don't always need the alcohol. I mean, my life revolves around driving my kid places, running errands, interviewing people, managing my family, and all of these things I do better when I don't have a head full of alcohol. That's where Best Day comes in. These days, if I'm not partying, I'm still having beers, and those beers are from the award-winning Best Day Brewery. And there are a lot of NA beers out there right now, but none taste as good as Best Day. I love the hazy IPA, the Coast that you can get on all Alaska airline flights, and everyone seems to like the Electro Lime Cerveza. I could go on and on as they have so many flavors, and I love them all. The beauty of Best Day is that they average about 60 calories and they won't get you in trouble. And pro tip, if you're partying, try to mix in a Best Day for every alcoholic beverage you have, and it will extend your night. It does it for me, and it keeps me from doing anything stupid. To have your best day or night ever, head on over to bestdaybrewing.com. If you make that order over $50, we'll also throw in free shipping. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. While yodeling in the mountains are beautiful, I'm going to bring up something that's not so beautiful. It's kind of ugly. You were born, I think, in 1920, and that's when the Nazi Party became active. But by the time you were 10 years old, had the Nazis taken over Germany?
Yeah, well, what happened after the finish of the First World War, they made it for Germany, who lost the war, very, very bad, to where Germany was in total bankruptcy. And so politically, you had about half of the population communists, and you had the other half of the right extremes, and there was practically a very small middle in the politics. And so in 1934, the Nazis, they lit the Reichstag in Berlin, and that's like the White House here.
Okay.
And blamed it on the communists. And that gave them enough votes to get in. And then people said, well, if they don't work, we just vote them out. But they could not be voted out because they had two armies, the SA and SS army, plus the little German army that was left. So there was no more voting. There was a dictatorship. And it happened also similar a little bit to Italy. They had Mussolini as a dictator, and Spain, they had Franco, and the Japanese also had a dictator idiot. So that just was the time. And right now we have a difficult time, but hopefully everything will work out well.
Well, you've lived this before. I mean, you've seen this in your childhood and you got away from it, and we'll talk about that. But I don't get political on this podcast because this is about skiing. But since you did live it, do you see similarities on what's going on in the U.S. today to what was happening when you were 5 to 10 years old in Germany?
No.
Okay.
It was different. What happens now with science way ahead, and it's a totally different time because it's just time changes. And you have a cell phone now.
Yeah.
So that's probably a good thing.
Yeah, I guess we're more informed and everybody can understand what's going on. But when you were a kid in Germany and all this stuff is happening, what are the things that you saw with your own eyes that made you grow up really fast?
Well, what I saw was horrible. Hitler was crazy. He was a bloody bastard, not comparable to anything,
Yeah.
It's just brainwashing came because the radio was just invented, and the little towns all have bought a little radio, and in the evening after work, they were sitting around the radio listening to this idiot Goebbels, Dr. Goebbels. God gave him one shorter leg, which he should have given him none. But that brainwashed the country pretty terribly because it was prohibited to listen to foreign radio. There were no foreign newspapers. It was just a dictatorship that was absolutely idiotic and horrible. How they washed the brain of most of the Germans.
And then you and your family aren't Nazis. Does that make it scary to live in Nazi Germany? Like, do you have to hide everything that you do?
Well, it split the people, you know. The ones that were going to church on Sunday, I don't know, it just was horrible. There's so much negativeness about what Germany went through. Make 10 books, thick books, what not to do, you know.
Yeah.
We were a group against it, naturally. And most rock climbers, we never met a Nazi on top of a mountain. And most skiers at that time, they were just a different group. And then you had the Nazi group where the young people were marching and one was dictating them, you know, to stop and to go. And we always said that we own the mountain and read the Indian books of Karl May, you know. We were another but smaller group that existed and we did own the mountain, kind of.
Well, it sounds like you may have owned the mountain, but there was also an incident on the mountain. And I don't know if you were escaping Nazi Germany on your own, if you had made plans with your family to get away, but there's a story about you being on your skis and getting shot by Nazis. I don't know how old you are or what the whole deal was. Can you let us know this story? Because it sounds fascinating.
Well, that is a long story and it's complex, but to make it very short, I tried to get into Switzerland, and the border between Austria and Switzerland I knew from skiing and mountain climbing, and the border was on the ridge of the mountain. And when I got there, I moved into a little hay hut, and I looked through binoculars, and I saw them marching up high, up on the border. And then one day, towards the end of the war, very close, there was nobody that I saw. So I climbed all the way up. And when I came around the corner of the rock, there were the German soldiers with guns protecting the Austrian border. And so I jumped around and went straight down the steep mountain, and they were shooting behind me, and one bullet went into the rucksack and hit the metal pipe frame and just never hit the heart. So it got stopped practically. And I ended up in the hospital under a different name. There was the nice Catholic hospital, and the woman asked for the name. I told her that the Nazis are after me. And so I took the name Schmidt, and she said, the young doctors are Nazi, but the chief doctor, Dr. Brenner, takes over at midnight and for the rest of the night. And so she saved me for him, and he put me into a room with about 16 or 18 other people that were hurt. And he was an anti-Nazi, fortunately, also. And he read all the mail that went in and out from the hospital, and he found out that the Gestapo knew that I was there now, somehow.
Huh.
But that guy was dead the next day. They gave him some poison.
The Gestapo?
There was a son of a bitch,
Yeah, so you got lucky
from
there.
Stuttgart. He was from Stuttgart. Anyhow, so that's a little bit of the story. And then, fortunately, the war was over on May 8th, and the first soldiers that came were Americans, and they were so nice and wonderful, and etc. They would like me to come and work for or help the CIC. And that's what then later, when I got out, happened. To work for the counterintelligence corps, and my younger brother also. And we got a car, and things were just beautiful. And I could ski race again, even though one leg was a little shorter.
So you went to escape Nazi Germany, you get shot, you get almost put in an Anne Frank situation where they kind of hide you so you're not taken by the Nazis. Then the war ends, and then you're counterintelligence or hired to be counterintelligence. So you went from like a Nazi escaper to like a secret agent?
You get the swines, the Nazi swines. Yeah, the worst ones we caught, bastards, idiots.
So you were responsible for helping catch Nazis and having them eliminated?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and my little brother too. And his English was better than mine. But somehow it worked, and the nightmare was over, The Nazi horror nightmare was over.
Yeah, I mean, just from what I know, and I grew up, a bar mitzvah Jewish kid who grew up with a fear of that, and it just seems like how could people be that terrible? But they were.
Dad, will you talk a little bit about Heine and he was in a concentration camp, and it goes maybe back to his question
It
of
was in a work camp, not in a concentration, but the work was kind of part, like they didn't feed him much,
Yeah.
They were in Thüringen, in the state of Thüringen. And when the English troops came there, when the people that were running the place, when they heard the shooting, they put on civil clothing and beat it. and everybody got sicker than hell because they got into the kitchen and ate. They were also hungry. My little brother hopped a train. There was the people on the locomotive, and totally unbelievable last train south to Bavaria. And so when he got back to my hometown, when the American soldiers came there first, he walked towards them, and they said, how are you, Heine? The Heine was the name for a German,
Okay.
Said, how did you know my name? And then they became friends,
And when you think about it, when the war ends, what's the reaction of the people in Germany? Is it a huge celebration that the nightmare is over?
Well, the feeling was that there was not enough butter, there was not enough bread, there were not enough potatoes, there were not they were all most of them pretty hungry,
Yeah.
And the last couple years was more of a denazification than it took them forever to be all Nazis or try to be. That started like 2 years before the war was over. There was a denazification because they couldn't eat it. It was scheiße.
Yeah. So if life is
Yeah.
scheiße there, and I would think that that's time for you to get out of Germany, and it sounds like eventually you head to New York City. And when you think about it, when you immigrate to America, what was the process of moving like back then? Was it a hard thing to do, or did you just have to have the money to get over?
What happened, I was racing again, and I had written a little booklet, German, English, English, German, that I sold. And the one American came and said, "Who is the fastest skier in Oberstaufen?" And they said, "Well, that's Klaus Obermeyer." So I met him, and he said, "We have a German guy in our factory in America, and you are also a technician, so maybe you can take over, and that way I have somebody to ski with in America," kind of. So his dad got a technician visa for me, and I came over on the flasher. So there was a horrible crossing of the ocean with big storm all the way to Halifax. And then we got a shore leave of 1 hour in Halifax, and from there down to New York, it was nice. And so I skied with him in Stowe, Vermont, and in all the eastern resorts. It was towards spring. It was February, beginning of February, and I met his dad. They had a little apartment where I stayed in Manhattan, and they wrote a nice big article in the New York Times. The famous German racer has arrived in New York City.
So you were a known entity when you got here.
But then, New York in the summer, never allowed to take money, only $10.
That's all you had?
You were allowed to take out officially from Germany $10. And that's what, like an idiot, that's what I did. And that didn't get me very far. Then I did work to get to know the factory well, and I worked as a plumber, but there was no skiing all summer, and a few times I had dinner with them, and in the fall I went to Stanley, Idaho, because that was well known. And Friedel Pfeiffer heard that I'm there through Fred Iselin from Switzerland, and called Friedel, said, "Oh, you have got to come to Aspen. We're most of us 10th Mountain Division people, and you're a technician, and we need you when you're not teaching skiing. We want you to make skiing safer and more fun." So that was in 1947. We were 7 people in the ski school with Friedel Pfeiffer. And now there are like 1,500 instructors.
It's time for my second round of sponsors, and I'm going to start things out with outdoor research. I've been using OR products since I moved to Seattle almost 25 years ago because they outperform everything on the market. I mean, they build their products to perform in the wet and soggy cold weather of the Pacific Northwest. And when you live where we do, you need to have the best in class. While OR has always been known for building industry-leading gear for mountaineers, skiers, and snowboarders, they've gone all in on an award-winning bike line that FreeHub describes as outdoor research has once again raised the bar, offering riding gear that's not just functional but also stylish and durable. That meticulous design and thoughtful engineering of the Freewheel collection have the power to transform the mountain biking experience. So high praise, and outdoor research is doing a lot of things on the athlete side. While they launched with an incredible team, they had the Van Steenbergen brothers, Georgia Astley, This year, they've added Casey Brown, Carson Storch, and others. And between the athletes and the events they support, while OR might be new to the bike world, they've always lived it, and there's not many brands doing what OR is doing in the world of bike. To see the new products and what the hype is all about, head on over to outdoorresearch.com. My final sponsor is Stanley, the iconic Northwest brand that invented the category of keeping things hot and cold over 100 years ago. You remember Stanley from your grandfather's green thermos that kept his coffee hot forever when he took you out on adventures. Well, Stanley still makes that bottle and so much more. Think tumblers, water bottles, barware, camping utensils, coolers, vacuum bottles. There really is something for everyone at Stanley. And between the unique colors and the collaborations that Stanley's doing, there really is something for everyone in the Stanley line. And they're not going to gouge you with crazy prices. Stanley is the originator, and they pride themselves on providing you and me with the best products at the best value. And that value gets even better when you shop with my code. To use it, head on over to stanley1913.com, go shopping, and buy a ton of stuff because, like I said, this code is 30% off. It's the best deal that Stanley offers. And when you check out, enter the code capital P-O-W-E-L-L. That's Powell 2025. So no spaces in between that. Capital P-O-W-E-L-L 2025. That's where you get your code. Thank you very much for the support, Stanley. They make the best gear in the world. You've seen them everywhere. And if you don't have one, you definitely need one. Those are my sponsors. Now let's jump back into the podcast. When you think about Sun Valley, at that time, I think the most famous resident of Sun Valley who was in a parking lot eating rabbit was Warren Miller. Did you meet up with Warren Miller when you were in Sun Valley too?
Yeah. Warren Miller, we stood in front of the window where they sold Jaguars, and just for 1 hour, never moved and just looked at the Jaguar. That is a beautiful car. Oh, my God. And he said, I think they need a dishwasher at Sun Valley. Then I got a job as a dishwasher. The dishwashing was from 7 in the evening till 1 o'clock in the morning. But I also got a job with a plumber and got some money to add to the $10.
Yeah.
So Warren Miller did take parachute strings and made ski boot laces out of them. And I made the cookie tie, which is instead of a tie, it's 2 woolen balls.
Oh, yeah.
And he said, I have a car and I need to go to Los Angeles and I don't have enough money for gas. Would you come with me and split the gas? And I said, yeah, well, if we visit some stores. And I sold some cookie ties and he sold ski boot laces and this little book he had done. And his parents in Los Angeles were really happy when we left because there was nothing in the refrigerator anymore. And also to call on jobs, we had a white shirt and a necktie, and I had a cookie tie. And Warren told me, he said, Klaus, said, if we go early enough to a motel, because we had slept in the long trunk of his car, they let us take a shower and gave a $1. And when they fixed the room on the checkout, they let you take a shower. So that's how we showered all the way.
So you and Warren were the 2 original ski bums.
But I don't know, there probably were more, but we certainly didn't have to act very much to be one. At the restaurant, the guy was an alcoholic, my boss, in Sun Valley.
Okay.
And he didn't show up half the time. So then they fired him and made me the chef. And I cooked everything for him. I remember that my mom was cooking Kartoffelpuffer, and all kinds of good stuff. Got rid of all the steel stuff, what they had things in that were 2-3 days old.
Yep.
So my boss says, when I quit to go back to Aspen to teach skiing, he said, you can come back and you have the same job next year. You did terrific,
Well, it doesn't sound like you went back the next year because I think that's when you went to Aspen. But I also feel like this is the perfect time to kind of break this. And then we can talk about the rest of, starting Obermeyer and your time in Aspen one day next week. But I do have one more question that I want to just end this round with, because you've lived 105 years, which is incredible. And while health is key to living 105 years, outside of that, what is the key to living a long and fulfilled life?
Just stay in good shape, stay healthy, as much as that is possible, and have good memories. Also, some you will not do again.
Yeah.
I think you're embracing life and be thankful for all the beauty and life on this planet, which is sensational. Just the birds, how they can fly in a snowstorm without goggles.
Yeah.
So, it's an incredible planet with all kinds of things happening on it.
Well, I look at it as a complete honor to have you on the podcast, and I want to thank you so far for telling your story, which has really been incredible, and I look forward to chatting with you again next week.
I'm not sure when you have available. I may be headed out to LA, and it's probably helpful if I'm translating a bit.
Yeah, for sure. It's great having you here.
Thanks. And I think you got something really special there.
I did too, man. I think it's going to be incredible.
You ask really good questions. You got some really nice takes on things, and I learned some things that I didn't even know. I can see why you're successful with this.
So that was time with Klaus Obermeyer, and honestly, if you ever told me that I would be having a conversation with a person that was 105 years old, I would be like, yeah, right. But how cool was that? I mean, this dude escaped Nazis and threw away an engineering background in order to become a ski bum and then ski instructor. But things all came together for Klaus in a perfect synchronicity of the world, and while he did teach skiing for many years, he also became arguably one of the most influential people in the history of skiing. And since I consider this podcast a living, breathing history book of skiing, snowboarding, and all the other sports that I cover, it was really an honor to get Klaus on the show. I need to thank Powell Movement alumni Doug Workman for making the intro and making this one happen. Without Doug, I don't think I'd be able to get Klaus. So thank you for that, Doug, and thank you for being so helpful behind the scenes. Also, I want to thank all of you for listening, and part 2 with Klaus is a little bit different, and it's just as good. I liked it. I think you're going to like it too. And if you like this episode, please review me. It's super easy to do if you have an iPhone, and it'll only take a minute. And I'm going to give you easy instructions so you can do it right now. Here's what you need to do. First, click that purple podcast icon on your iPhone home screen. Second, search for the Powell Movement. And even if you already subscribe to the podcast, you still need to search for the Powell Movement. Third, scroll down to where you see my logo. Fourth, click my logo. Fifth, scroll down to where you see ratings and reviews. Sixth, star rate me with 5 stars, please. And 7, if you want to review me and go that extra mile, you can write out a couple sentences about how awesome I am or how much I suck. Either way, please write something. I think it'll all help me in the algorithm, and it's greatly appreciated. Thank you for doing that. And finally, please support my incredible sponsors for making this show happen. They are Liquid Force, Elan Skis, Outdoor Research, Stanley, and Best Day Brewing. Have a great week, everyone.